She had given everything: her youth, her devotion, her relentless effort to hold together a marriage that was never truly hers, to earn a place in a family that had already decided she didn't belong. Maya Shen was the heir to a corporate empire, but within the walls of her own home, she was a stranger fighting for scraps of affection. She had loved and she had served, hoping that time and patience might soften the cold, unyielding hearts around her. But time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it only sharpens the blade. Her husband, Evan Su, had always stood apart, present yet unreachable, dutiful yet distant. He had watched her struggle through years of silent scrutiny, the in-laws who dismissed her with practiced smiles, the one. Relatives who circled like vultures around the family fortune, the unspoken expectation that she bear the weight of legacy and lineage without complaint. He never raised his voice to defend her, never stepped between her and the slow erosion of her spirit. He called it neutrality. She called it abandonment. Then came the reckoning, the exposure of a decades-old secret, the unearthing of a betrayal that ran deeper than any of them had known. Maya discovered that the man who had stood by her side had been holding more than just her secrets. He had been guarding his own, and the truth shattered everything she thought she understood. The marriage, the company, the future she had sacrificed for. All of it rested on a foundation of silence and sacrifice that had never been hers to build. Now, with the dust still settling and the weight of the past bearing down on her shoulders, Maya faces a question far more dangerous than any financial loss. When the people you trusted most reveal themselves to be strangers, when the life you built begins to crack at its seams, what do you hold on to? And more terrifying still, if you let go of everything you once believed in, who will you become on the other side? Will Maya finally stop bleeding for a family that never saw her worth and walk away before she loses herself entirely? Can she summon the courage to tear down the walls of silence and start again from ashes? And when Evan Su finally looks at her, truly looks, will he see the woman he failed, or the one who might just rise from the ruins stronger than he ever imagined? The next morning, at 9:57, Maya Shen parked her car at the end of the narrow alley across from Everjoy Tower. She had driven past this alley countless times, but had never truly noticed the cafe called Old Times. Its storefront was small, wedged between a laundromat and a bookstore on the verge of bankruptcy. The sign was a faded, dark green, the paint peeling, the letter C half gone, leaving Offie hanging forlornly above the door. In front sat a potted osmanthus tree on the brink of death, its leaves curled at the edges, utterly lifeless. She pushed the door open, and the hinge let out a mournful groan. Inside, the space was deeper than it appeared from the outside, dimly lit, with a few faded movie posters hanging on the walls. In the corner stood an old gramophone, its needle resting on a vinyl record, spinning out a scratchy jazz tune. The air was thick with the smell of aged coffee oils and old book paper, with a faint hint of cedar incense. There was only one customer. Evan Su sat at the table farthest in, by the window, a steaming cup of black coffee before him, a small silver spoon resting on the rim. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a charcoal grey cashmere cardigan over a white cotton shirt, the top button undone. He looked more relaxed than he ever did at the office, but those deep-set eyes remained calm, gazing out at the traffic streaming past. When he heard the door, he slowly turned his head. "You came?" His voice was flat, unreadable. The few steps Maya took toward him felt like walking on cotton. She hadn't slept all night. She'd only splashed water on her face, thrown on a black turtleneck, and skipped lipstick. The pale, unfamiliar face in the mirror had startled her. She sat down across from Evan, and the scent of coffee hit her nostrils, easing the ache in her tired eyes, just a little. Evan, she began, her throat painfully dry. Hold on, he said, raising a hand, his fingertips tapping twice on the table. Since you wanted to talk in person, let me finish first. Before you say anything, listen to the whole story. Then you decide what to say, or whether to say anything at all. Maya stared at his fingers, those hands she'd watched for 5 years, long and slender, with defined knuckles, handing her documents, making her coffee, scheduling her days. She'd never truly noticed their strength, but now she remembered rifling through her father's old desk drawers as a child, finding a yellowed design sketch with a signature at the bottom, its sharp lines somehow reminiscent of the hand before her. Evan picked up a brown craft paper file from the empty chair beside him and placed it on the table, but didn't open it immediately. He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed on the ring of condensation around the rim, as if gathering his thoughts from a long, winding past. 28 years ago, my father, Zheng Shu, and your father, Bowen Shen, rented a tin shack in a village in Shenzhen and founded what would become Everjoy. Back then, it was called Eversharp Electronics. Evan's voice was soft, but carried an undeniable weight. My father graduated from Huazhong University of Science and Technology, majored in radio engineering. Your father was in sales. They met at the Canton Fair and hit it off immediately. My father brought the technical know-how. Your father brought the capital, though there wasn't much, just a few $1,000s, but your father mortgaged his family home. Maya held her breath. She'd heard fragments of this. Her father, when drunk, would sometimes mutter about Old Sue, but never in detail. In Maya's memory, Everjoy had always been the vast corporation that existed from the moment she became aware of the world. Her father was always the triumphant tycoon. She'd never imagined that tin shack. Their first product was an electronic component tester, sold to small appliance factories in the South. My father's technology was considered advanced at the time, and orders slowly grew. The tin shack became a proper factory, and Eversharp became Everjoy. Your father said joy sounded better than sharp. It meant making customers happy. My father teased him for being corny, but he agreed. Evan's mouth twitched slightly, as if suppressing a smile. But in the 7th year, something went wrong. Evan's fingers tightened, his thumb unconsciously tracing the rim of his coffee cup. That year, Everjoy landed a big contract, automating a production line for a Hong Kong-based company. The deadline was tight, and my father personally led the team soldering circuit boards, working overtime for over 40 days straight. One morning, while debugging high-voltage equipment, there was an accident. It wasn't operator error, the equipment itself had a design flaw. The supplier had swapped out the component's voltage ratings, but at the time, no one could trace it. My father took full blame because he was the chief engineer. Maya's eyes widened. She'd never heard this version. Her father had only ever told her that Zheng Shu had died of illness, the details deliberately vague. My father was rushed to the hospital with severe burns over most of his body. He held on for 12 days, but didn't make it. Evan's voice was eerily calm, as if reading a coroner's report that had nothing to do with him. I was 7. Your father came to the funeral, knelt before my mother, and promised to take care of us. My mother later remarried and moved to Canada, but I stayed because my father left me a letter before he died. It said, Evan, remember, Everjoy was built by both of us. Half of it belongs to you, but don't rush to claim it. Wait until you're grown, until you're clear-headed enough to decide whether you want it. He paused, sliding the brown file across the table. A copy of that letter, my father's original technology patents, the initial partnership agreement, and the equity confirmation your father later signed. They're all in here. After Everjoy grew, your father found my mother and signed legal documents acknowledging my father's technical stake as 17% of the group's total equity. It was held in a private fund, managed by me. Besides your father and my mother, only one elder board member knew. When I came of age, your father arranged for me to join Everjoy, starting from the bottom, eventually moving to the executive assistant role. He told me, "Evan, I want you where I can see you. When you're ready to leave, or to take what's yours, I'll honor it." Maya's hands were trembling. She remembered what she'd said to Evan yesterday, never to be rehired, the words burning in her ears. He'd never argued back, never used these documents to pressure her, even during the 2 years since her father's stroke, quietly staying in his role, handling all her administrative burdens without complaint. Then yesterday, Maya's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me? You could have shown me all this. You could have explained." Evan looked at her, and for the first time, something genuine flickered in his eyes, a deep exhaustion, as if he'd seen through everything. "Maya, do you really think, when you were pounding the table and yelling at me from your high horse, that if I'd pulled out these old papers and said, 'Actually, half this company is mine,' you would have believed me? You'd have thought I was threatening you, provoking you, and you'd have thrown me and the files out the door. You're too much like your father when he was young. No, you're more stubborn than him, because you've never really failed. You've been raised on a pedestal, and you think everyone who defers to you is doing so because they should." The words struck like a needle, finding the most tender spot in Maya's chest. She wanted to argue, to say, "How dare you judge me?" but instead, a sob escaped her throat. Because she knew Evan was telling the truth. That scene yesterday, her rage, her arrogance, every detail proved it. She was a spoiled heiress who'd never truly been contradicted. "That money," Maya struggled to steady her breath. $26 billion. You really took it all? All of it. Evan nodded without hesitation. By law and agreement, it was my father's rightful share, entrusted to me. I'm exercising the equity redemption. Every step has followed compliance. Your father's signed authorization included a special clause. If the fund manager deems the company has fallen into significant management risk or violated its founding principles, I can liquidate the corresponding assets without board approval. And yesterday, when you fired me in front of the entire company over a coffee stain, that qualified as significant management risk. Maya's mind flashed back to her outburst, pounding the table, shouting, assistants peeking through the door. At the time, she thought she was asserting authority. Now she realized those prying eyes were evidence of Evan's 15 years of restraint. Had he planned it? Or had her moment of rage simply been the last straw in his long wait? "So, you've been waiting for me to mess up." Maya's heart twisted painfully. Evan was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "Not waiting for you to mess up, Maya. I was waiting for you to grow up, to learn respect. After your father's stroke, I thought that if you could rise to the occasion, those agreements could stay sealed forever. I even considered quietly stepping away once Everjoy was stable, moving to Canada to be with my mother, letting that money be the repayment for your father looking after us. But yesterday..." He lowered his gaze, the silver spoon tapping once against the cup's rim with a clear note. "Yesterday, when you dismissed me, the way you looked at me, it was exactly like the looks I saw from certain people at my father's funeral. That condescending, pitying, 'you're just a burden' look. Maya, my father gave his life for Everjoy, and your father spent half a lifetime honoring that promise. And you dismissed all of it over a cup of coffee." The cafe was quiet, except for the gramophone's soft static, the jazz singer murmuring some sad tune about loss. Maya lowered her head, tears splashing onto the table, darkening the old mahogany grain. She tried desperately to control herself, but choked sobs still slipped through her fingers. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, the words shattering like broken glass. I was out of my mind yesterday. I didn't know. Dad never told me any of this. Evan, I'm not making excuses. I really didn't know. If I had..." "If you'd known, would you have treated me differently?" he asked softly. Maya looked up, her vision blurred. "No. But I know that if you were just an ordinary assistant, I probably still would have. That's the part that disgusts me most. I'm not sorry because you have a background. I'm sorry because I realized I could be so cruel to someone who'd worked for me for 5 years, just because he spilled coffee on a report. That's more terrifying than the withdrawal, Evan. I've become exactly the kind of person Dad always said he hated." Evan blinked. He watched Maya's tear-streaked, unguarded face, his gaze lingering on her eyelashes for a moment before drifting toward the pedestrians outside. Something in his expression softened, the tension in his jaw easing. "You're more honest than your father," he said. "Your dad's greatest talent is dressing up every mistake as a necessary sacrifice. But you, at least you admit it when you're wrong. That's from your mother." Maya froze. Her mother had died when she was 6, and her father rarely spoke of her, only saying she was too principled for business. How did Evan know? But he didn't continue that thread. He turned back, sliding the brown file closer. "Take this, read it, and tell your father I've invoked that clause. The board is going to explode. Maya, you're not just facing a $26 billion gap, you're facing the fallout of a 28-year-old secret. Once shareholders find out your father concealed his partner's death and equity, even if legally settled, the damage to trust might be worse than the money." Maya took the file, her fingers brushing the rough craft paper. It felt heavy. She drew a deep breath, wiped her tears, and met Evan's eyes. "Then tell me, what do you want me to do? Is there still a way back?" Evan's gaze swept over her face, then settled on the glass tower across the street. Sunlight broke through the clouds, the building's reflective panels blazing with shards of light. He was silent for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. "Go put out the fires inside the company first," he finally said. "The suppliers, the employees, the property management, handle them one by one. The money will stay in the escrow account. I'll give you 30 days. If, in that time, you can show me Everjoy still embodies the joy in its name, not just a profit machine, not a pedestal, but a place where people can work with dignity and take responsibility, then we can talk about what comes next. Otherwise..." He didn't finish, but the meaning was clear. Maya stood, her knees nearly buckling. She steadied herself against the table. 30 days. "Okay, Evan, I won't waste a single one." She turned toward the door, then stopped halfway, not looking back. "Yesterday, when I fired you, I said never to be rehired. I take that back, but I don't just want to take it back. I want to ask you to come back. Not as an assistant, as a partner, if you're willing." Behind her, a long pause. Then Evan's voice came, calm but laced with something unidentifiable. "Let's see what happens in 30 days first. Maya, your problem has never been a lack of ability. It's that you've never truly humbled yourself. Today's tears count as one step. But what about tomorrow?" Maya pushed open the cafe door, the hinge groaning again. The sunlight flooded in, harsh and blinding. She squinted, breathed in the street air thick with exhaust and dust, and strode toward her car. The craft file pressed against her chest, both a verdict and a lifeline. She started the engine. Her phone buzzed. Arthur Zhang. "Ms. Shen, emergency board meeting in half an hour. Your father, I've informed him. He said to let you represent him. Also, I personally covered this month's property fee, but next month. I'll handle it, she cut him off. Arthur, I need 3 things. 1. Compile all supplier overdue payments, prioritized by urgency, in my inbox tonight. 2. Notify all department heads. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., all hands meeting. Everyone, including janitors and security. 3. Set up meetings with the major shareholders. Tell them I have important news and I'll go whenever works for them. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then Arthur said, Ms. Shen, your voice sounds different. Maya gripped the wheel, catching her own reflection in the rear view, haggard but resolute. She smiled grimly. Yeah, different, Arthur. Was I really that insufferable before? A quiet chuckle from the phone. Pretty insufferable, but now maybe a little better. She ended the call and pulled out of the alley. Everjoy Tower grew larger in the rear view, its glass panels reflecting the midday sun, too bright to look at. She didn't know how 30 days would end, but at least now, clutching that craft file, something deep inside her, something untouched, was beginning to break open, painfully, slowly. It was the secret her father had buried for half a lifetime, and the dignity Evan had guarded through 7 years of silence. And Maya, in that old coffee shop this morning, had finally felt their weight for the first time. Maya parked at the hospital at 2 in the afternoon. She'd first attended the emergency board meeting, a chaotic room of 8 directors, some Asian-faced, others whispering. Arthur hunched in a corner with his laptop casting a pale glow across his tired features. When Maya walked in, all eyes pinned her like knives. Ms. Shen, can you explain this private fund? The most senior independent director, Henry Joe, began, his voice cold as steel. None of us knew about a shadow fund, much less an assistant with authority over $26 billion. This is a major disclosure violation. Maya placed the craft file on the table without opening it, calmly scanning every face. In the past, she'd have raised her voice and asserted dominance. Today, she spoke softly. Everyone, I learned about this last night. Evan Su is the son of my father's founding partner from 28 years ago. The money represents the equity stake of Mr. Zheng Shu, legally assigned. My father signed proper agreements, entrusting Evan as manager. He hid this from everyone, including me. I'm also a victim. The room erupted. Henry shot up. Bowen Shen has been siphoning the company? Private dealings? What about the rest of us shareholders? Maya raised a hand, palm down, a gesture of restraint. Mr. Joe, I understand your anger, but legally, Evan's claim is valid. This isn't embezzlement. The real issue is how we manage a $26 billion liquidity gap. I promise 3 things. 1. I'll do everything to recover in 30 days. 2. I'll share the full historical agreement with all shareholders. 3. If things don't improve, I'll take full responsibility, including stepping down as CEO. The room went still. Arthur looked up from his laptop, surprised. Even Henry sat back, eyeing her warily. Maya, you never used to say, take responsibility. Past is past. She tucked the file away. Meeting adjourned. I need time. Outside, her back was soaked with cold sweat, but a strange calm had settled over her, like she'd finally shed a burdensome, gilded shell. She called her father's attending doctor, confirmed Bowen was stable enough, and drove to the hospital. In the ward, Bowen lay propped against pillows, the feeding tube removed, a nurse spooning rice porridge into his mouth. When he saw Maya, he waved the nurse out, then fixed his cloudy eyes on the craft file in her hands, his lips parting. So you know, he said, his voice clearer than the night before. Maya sat beside the bed, placing the file on her lap. Evan gave me everything. Dad, I have one question. Why did you hide it? Even just a hint before I took over, even a whisper that Evan was special, I wouldn't have made such a mess. Bowen closed his eyes, his cheek twitching. A long silence filled the room, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the monitor. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry as rustling leaves. Because of your mother. Maya froze. Your mother's name was Yun Jo. You probably only remember her as gentle. He opened his eyes, staring at the blank ceiling. She and I and Jiang Su were classmates in college. She studied accounting. Jiang was in love with her, but he was too introverted to say it. She chose me. Maya's fingers tightened on the file's edge. She'd never heard this. Her mother was a blurry, gardenia-scented memory. Her father always said, "Your mother's life was short." After Jiang's accident, your mother was consumed by guilt. Bowen's voice dropped, aged with old pain. She thought it was her fault, that if she'd chosen Jiang instead of me, he wouldn't have worked himself to death. She barely slept for years, her health failing, eventually diagnosed with heart problems. The doctors said it was stress-related. On her deathbed, she held my hand and said, "Bowen, you must take care of Jiang's son. That child lost his father. I owe him. You'll pay that debt for me." Bowen's eyes leaked slow tears. He didn't wipe them. So I arranged for Evan to join the company. I gave him the best education, signed those agreements. But I never told you, because I was afraid you'd inherit your mother's guilt. It destroyed her. I didn't want it to destroy you. I wanted you to be sharp, confident, untouchable. But I was wrong. Without guilt, you became arrogant. Maya's tears rose again, but she held them back, a hot knot in her throat. Her mother's quiet weariness, all those unspoken depths, it had been a secret. And her father, trying to protect her, had built another kind of prison. "Dad," Evan said, "I remind him of you when you were young," she finally said, her voice rough. "He said you were stubborn, but I don't think I'm like you, because you can feel guilt. You keep promises for decades. I couldn't even feel guilt, just anger. That's more like grandfather. You always said I take after him." Bowen gave a faint, bitter smile. "Your grandfather was a warlord's son. Never apologized in his life. You do take after him, but today, you've changed." "Who changed you? Evan?" Maya shook her head. "Myself. Dad, Evan gave me 30 days. I need to show him Everjoy still has its joy. I don't know how, but I have to try. If I fail..." "If you fail, come lie here beside me, and I'll teach you how to trade stocks." A weak but mischievous grin tugged at his lips, like the young salesman who'd once charmed strangers at a trade fair. "Don't worry, Daddy has a secret stash. Enough for 2 years of wonton soup." Maya laughed through tears. She reached for his thin hand, a hand that had greenlit billions in deals, now light as paper. She understood, for the first time, that true strength wasn't the volume of your shouting, but the courage to face the consequences. Leaving the hospital, the sky had gone dark. She didn't go home, she drove straight to Everjoy Tower. The empty office floor was lit only by emergency lights. A janitor was mopping. She looked up in surprise. "Miss Shen, so late." "Auntie," Maya called, stopping at the elevator. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 8 years, Miss Shen." "In all that time, has anyone ever thanked you?" The janitor gripped her mop, a hesitant smile. "Occasionally, Mr. Xu would say, 'Good work.' Others, they're busy." Maya nodded and stepped into the elevator. As the floor numbers climbed, she tallied in her head. Everjoy headquarters plus all branches, about 3,700 employees. In her 2 years, She'd spoken at countless all-hands, declared, "We are family," but she'd never truly looked anyone in the eye. She cared only about the numbers, board votes, media headlines. Evan, just an assistant, had remembered the janitor's name. The elevator opened on the 43rd floor. She walked into her office, not turning on the main lights, only her desk lamp. A warm amber glow fell across the spot where she'd pounded the table yesterday. On the surface, a faint watermark from where Evan had wiped up the spilled coffee. She'd recoiled then. Now she reached out and traced the faint streak with her finger. She opened her laptop and began reviewing Arthur's supplier list. First entry, Minghui Precision Machinery, owed $1 million, overdue 120 days. She remembered them. She'd berated their sales manager in front of procurement, docked 5% for a defect that was actually shipping damage. Evan had quietly suggested it wasn't entirely their fault. Her response? "Evan, whose side are you on?" She'd owe Minghui an apology. She scrolled to Mr. Zhao's number. Her finger hovered over the call button, her stomach twisting. In the past, it was always the supplier begging her for time. Now, she had to call and humbly ask for leniency. But she remembered Evan's words. "You've never truly humbled yourself." She thought of the janitor's mop, her father's hospital tears. She pressed dial. Mr. Zhao answered, wary. "Ms. Shen? So late?" "Mr. Zhao, sorry to bother you." Maya slowed her words, steadying her voice. "Two things. First, Everjoy owes your company that $1 million. It should have been paid 3 months ago. That's on me. I sincerely apologize." A pause. Mr. Zhao clearly hadn't expected this. "Ms. Shen, what is this?" "Second," she continued, "I can't pay all at once right now. We're facing some liquidity issues. But I can guarantee $300,000 within 10 days, the rest in 2 monthly installments. If you accept, I'll sign a personal guarantee. Also, I reviewed last year's quality issue. It was a logistics problem, not Minghui's. I was too harsh with your team. I'm sorry." Mr. Zhao's breathing was audible. Then he let out a laugh, surprised, relieved. "Ms. Shen, this call is worth more than $1 million. I've done business with your father for 20 years. He never said soft words, but he always came to our workshop. You're his daughter, and the first time you call, you say, 'I was wrong.' Okay, I accept. I'll have legal send the revised contract tomorrow." She ended the call, slumping back, her back drenched with sweat, but a small smile crept across her face. Apologizing hadn't bankrupted the company. It had turned $1 million creditor into a partner willing to negotiate. She'd always thought admitting fault was weakness, but Mr. Zhao's tone told her otherwise. Honesty could be the most efficient negotiation. She moved to the next entry. Greenlink Logistics, owed $130,000, overdue 200 days. A young woman answered, timid. Ms. Shen? Our boss is out of town." "That's fine. Tell him Everjoy will settle this month. I'll personally follow up." She softened her voice. "And tell him I'm sorry we've taken so long." The woman sniffled. "Ms. Shen, could you say that again? I want to make sure I get it right." Maya blinked, then repeated. "I said, I'm sorry. We've been in the wrong." Yes, I'll tell him." The girl's voice brightened. "You're really nice, Ms. Shen. Our boss curses Everjoy all the time, but I always knew there were good people there." Maya hung up and pressed her forehead against the cool desk. The girl called her nice, but she'd been anything but. She remembered Evan once saying that the worst tragedy wasn't making a mistake, but lacking the courage to admit it. Today, she'd finally found that courage. Too late, but at least she'd started. She worked through the list. By the 9th call, her voice was hoarse. At 1 a.m., she closed her laptop and walked to the window. From the 43rd floor, the city had quieted, lights scattered like fallen stars. She wondered where Evan was tonight, whether he might be staring at the same night sky. That man had used 7 years of silence to buy 30 days of waiting. She didn't know if he'd ever forgive her, but at least she could make herself worthy of those 30 days. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Property fee situation. I heard from Auntie Liu. I'll reimburse your personal payment tomorrow. No need to thank me. Evan. She stared at the screen, then typed back. It wasn't a company expense. I paid from my own card. Don't worry about it. And how did you know Auntie Liu came to me? Instant reply. Her brother was my college classmate. She came to sign with you 4 years ago. You didn't even look up. Maya closed her eyes. She remembered vaguely. A merger, someone handing her an employee form. She'd scribbled a signature without seeing a face. Evan had woven a web she couldn't see. Every janitor, every accountant, every logistics assistant, all people he'd cared for over those 7 years. And she, the nominal CEO, had been blind to it all. She typed, Evan, I owe you more than an apology. Tomorrow's all-hands meeting. Will you come? I'm not asking you to come back, but if you'd just watch from a corner, I want you to see I'm learning. The screen went dark. She'd almost put it down when it glowed again. I won't, but if you really want to change Everjoy, you should see Henry Joe. He knows more than I do. Her heart jolted at the name. Henry Joe, the independent director who'd dressed down her father at the meeting. Why was Evan sending her to him? What other secret was hidden? She pocketed the phone, went to the bathroom, and stared at her reflection. Tired, but with a new resilience in her eyes. She splashed cold water on her face and whispered, Tomorrow, all hands. Day after, Henry Joe. 30 days, not one wasted. Water droplets dripped into the porcelain sink, ringing crisp in the silence. Outside, the city was deep in night, but a faint grey tinged the horizon, the darkest hour before dawn, and its promise. The next morning at 8:30, the Everjoy headquarters multi-purpose hall was packed. These all-hands normally only happened at year-end, but last night's notice, everyone must attend, no excuses, had brought everyone. Coders from IT, clerks from admin, janitors, security guards, cafeteria cooks. Over 300 people filled every folding chair, with more standing at the back, spilling out the doors. Maya stood behind the side curtains, gazing at the mass of faces. She clutched the speech she'd prepared late into the night, but the edges of the paper were softened with sweat. In the past, she'd never used notes. She'd revel in the command, the glib control. Today, she felt like a first-year teacher, her heart pounding. Arthur rose from the front row and nodded. Time. Maya drew a long breath, pushed through the side door, and stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on her. Curious, tense, indifferent, eager. Her gaze swept each face, finally landing on a figure in blue work overalls at the back corner. Auntie Liu, the janitor, seated in the last row, twisting her hands, looking down when Maya saw her. Colleagues, Maya began, her voice amplified throughout the hall. I didn't call this meeting for year-end review or awards. Today, I'm here to say just one thing. I'm sorry. A rustle went through the room. Some whispered, others gaped. Maya pressed on. Yesterday, our company faced a major financial crisis. Some of you may have heard, but I want to tell you that the root of this crisis isn't market forces. It's me. My arrogance, my impulsiveness, my disrespect. I fired someone who meant everything to this company, costing us $26 billion in liquidity. It's not the market's fault, it's not yours, it's mine alone." She paused, her throat tightening, took a sip of water, and continued. "I apologize for the past 2 years, for how I barked at you, slammed tables, dismissed your work. Especially Finance Officer Liu. I emailed you at midnight, even yelled at you on the phone for being inefficient." "Officer Liu, I'm sorry. And Lad Engineer Lee, last year when your project was delayed, I called your team a bunch of failures in front of everyone. Lead Engineer Lee, I'm sorry. And Auntie Liu, the janitor, I passed your cleaned hallways every day and never said thank you. I'm sorry." She called names one by one, recalling every moment she'd lost her temper. Some details she'd nearly forgotten, but as she forced herself to remember, each scene replayed sharp as yesterday, slamming files, kicking chairs, hanging up on people, using the cruelest words on the most hard-working. The employees listened in silence. Some wiped their eyes, others clasped shaking hands. "I know an apology doesn't undo anything." Maya's voice trembled, but she steadied it. "But I'm here today to promise you this. From now on, Everjoy is no longer my one-woman show. There may not be much money in the company accounts, but if you choose to stay, if you still believe in this place that once disappointed you, I'll prove with every effort over the coming days that the joy in Everjoy doesn't mean keeping the boss happy. It means everyone who works here can feel secure, respected, and hopeful." She bowed deeply. As her head lowered, tears splashed onto the carpet, leaving dark spots. She held the pose until her knees ached, then slowly straightened. Silence. Then someone began clapping. Sparse applause spread from the front row. Arthur stood first, then Officer Liu, then Lead Engineer Lee, whom she'd called a failure, then Auntie Liu. The applause swelled, a rising tide, until it filled the room with thunder. Some clapped and wiped their eyes, others shouted, "Go, Miss Shen!" Maya stood on stage, enveloped by that wave of sound, a hot, salty surge rising in her chest. Honesty could travel, humility could transform. After the meeting, employees filed out in a slow stream. Maya leaned against the stage edge, her legs weak. Arthur approached, handing her a water bottle. "Ms. Shen, I've been in finance for 15 years, and that was the first time Everjoy felt like a real company." She drank half the bottle, her voice hoarse. "Don't get ahead of yourself. Money still needs fixing. Arthur, set up a meeting with Henry Zhou this afternoon. I'll go to his place." Arthur frowned. "Mr. Zhou? His attitude yesterday. You'll hit a wall." "I'll hit it anyway." She put down the bottle. "Someone told me Henry knows more than he's said. I suspect he's connected to Evan's father's accident too." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "I'll arrange it. And speaking of Evan, he really didn't show?" Maya looked toward the hall entrance, now empty. She shook her head. "He said he wouldn't, but he gave me direction." At 3 p.m., Maya parked in an old villa district west of the city. Henry Zhou lived in a modest old Western-style house with a small courtyard, a tall magnolia tree in full bloom, heavy white blossoms bowing the branches. She rang the bell. Henry himself answered, in a grey wool vest, holding a magnifying glass and a yellowed newspaper. "What do you want?" He didn't step aside, his voice still cold. "Mr. Zhou, I have questions. About Zheng Su, about the accident 28 years ago." Maya held his gaze. "Evan sent me. He said, you know more than anyone." Henry's fingers tightened around the magnifying glass, the porch light deepening the lines on his face. After a long pause, he stepped back. "Come in. Tea's in the kitchen. Help yourself." She followed him inside. The sitting room was cluttered but tidy, shelves stuffed with engineering textbooks, some with cracked spines. Henry sank into a wicker chair, set the magnifying glass on the coffee table, and gestured for her to sit. "Evan sent you to me," he began, his voice gravelly with age. "He really wants you to know everything." "Good. I'm tired of keeping secrets too." He rose, retrieved a tin box from the highest shelf, and opened it. Inside were yellowed blueprints and a few photographs. He pulled one out and handed it to her. The photo showed 4 people: young Bowen Shen, Jung-soo, a delicate-featured woman, Maya recognized her mother, Yun-jo, and a bespectacled, lean young man. They stood before a factory gate, a banner reading "Eversharp Electronics" behind them. "The one with glasses," Henry pointed, "is my younger brother, Howard Jo. He was the quality inspector for the high-voltage equipment." Maya's heart seized. "Your father never told you that the components that failed had initially passed inspection." Henry's voice was heavy and slow. He'd pressured Howard to fast-track the inspection to meet the deadline. Howard signed off under pressure. When the equipment failed and Jung-soo was injured, Howard, he couldn't live with the guilt. That winter, he jumped into the Pearl River. They never found his body. The room fell silent, only the soft tap of magnolia petals against the window. Maya gripped the photo, her knuckles white. She'd always thought the accident was an external fault. The suppliers swapped components, Jung-soo, an innocent victim. She'd never imagined this middle link, her father's deadline pressure, a compromised inspector, 2 lives lost. Jung-soo dead, Howard Jo dead, and Henry, the surviving brother, had sat on Everjoy's board for 28 years, watching Bowen and Maya, carrying what burden? "Mr. Jo," Maya's voice was sandpaper. Why did you never speak out?" Henry laughed coldly. "Speak out? Your father knelt before me, promised to rename the company Everjoy, promised Jung-soo's son a future, promised to support my mother. He kept his word. What could I do? Put him in jail? What about the dozens of workers who depended on Everjoy? Who'd raise Jung-soo's son? I could only swallow this rotten debt, drink alone while looking at my brother's photo." He pointed at the tin box. "Inside is my brother's suicide note. Just one line. 'Brother, I failed Mr. Zhang.' The night before he jumped, he came to me, crying, confessed he'd signed a false report. I told him to confront Bowen. He was too scared. He'd hurt the company, the workers. He was spineless. But he was my brother." Maya bowed her head, tears falling silently. So many bones were buried beneath Everjoy's foundation. Her father's glamorous business life had been bought with such heavy coin. And Evan, that quiet, even-tempered man, did he know? How had he worked under her father's watch for 7 years, suppressing hatred? "Mr. Jo, does Evan know about Howard?" Maya asked. Henry shook his head. "I couldn't tell him. He knows his father's death was unjust, but he only knew about the supplier. Your father buried it deep. Even Jung-soo's widow didn't know. If Evan found out his father's death also involved another man's suicide, I can't imagine." Maya gently replaced the photo and tin box on the shelf, then turned to Henry with solemnity. "Mr. Jo, I apologize to you on my father's behalf. What he did 28 years ago, whatever the reasons, caused irreversible loss. The fact that you've told me this means you still hold a thread of hope for Everjoy. I will tell Evan all of it. I will lay every truth in the sunlight. If you're willing, I want you to stay on the board, to hold me accountable, to keep me from repeating mistakes." Henry looked at her, his clouded eyes glinting with something complex. "You have more spine than your father. His greatest fear was the truth coming out, and you're deliberately tearing it open." "If it doesn't tear open, the wound won't heal," Maya stood. "Thank you, Mr. Jew. I'll visit again." At the door, Henry's voice came from behind. "Evan is a good soul. His father was too. If you can truly face him with all the facts, there might still be a way." Maya walked out into the dusk, the magnolia scent heavy and almost tragic. She sat in her car, not starting it, and typed to Evan. "I met with Henry Zoe. There's something I need to tell you about another inspector involved in your father's accident. If you have time, let's meet again. This time, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want you to know the whole, unvarnished past." She stared at the screen for 10 minutes. No reply. She started the car and merged into the twilight traffic. In her mirror, Henry's villa shrank, the magnolia swaying, white petals tumbling in the breeze, carpeting the ground. Late that night, Maya returned to her apartment. Her fridge contained half a carton of expired milk and 2 limp cucumbers. She sighed and made instant noodles. As she slurped them at the kitchen table, her phone finally rang. Evan's caller ID. She picked up. A long silence, then his voice came through, a slight rasp she hadn't heard this morning. The inspector. What was his name? Howard Joe, Henry's younger brother. Maya put down her chopsticks. He signed the faulty inspection, then killed himself. His note said he failed your father. A sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a long pause. Maya listened to his breathing, didn't rush him. Finally, he said, "My father's letter mentioned someone. The young man shouldn't bear this burden. I didn't understand as a child. Now I do. He was still defending that inspector on his deathbed." Maya gripped the phone. "Evan." "Tomorrow, same cafe, 10 o'clock. He cut her off. "Bring every file, every record, every testimony. If we're going to expose the truth, let's do it completely." "Okay." After the call, Maya looked at her cold, clumpy noodles and realized the landscape had shifted. The 30-day countdown was still ticking, but she'd stopped fearing the number. Each day she was pulling closer to truths hidden too long. And truth, though brutal, could at least let you stand solidly on the ground. She cleared her bowl, opened her laptop, and began compiling everything she had. Her father's agreements, Evan's documents, the contents of Henry's tin box, and the archived accident report from 28 years ago that Arthur had retrieved from storage. She'd be ready for tomorrow's second meeting. Every piece of paper, nothing missing. Outside, the night was ocean deep. Under her desk lamp, Maya turned the yellowed pages. She felt like an archaeologist excavating a buried city. That city held friendship, betrayal, death, atonement, and she and Evan were the last 2 living souls within its walls. They had to exhume every skeleton before deciding whether to rebuild or abandon the land. At 3 a.m., she closed the final file, rubbing her tired eyes. Her phone screen held a draft text to Evan, never sent. Instead, she whispered to the dark living room, "Evan, see you tomorrow." The words floated into empty air without echo. But she knew that somewhere in the city, another person was also awake, revisiting the same past. The 30-day pact had truly become a shared endeavor. At exactly 10 o'clock the next day, Maya walked into Old Times Cafe, carrying a heavy folder. The door hinge groaned its familiar cry. The gramophone was playing a different record, a slower piano piece, notes falling like drops of water. Evan sat in his usual seat, black coffee in front of him, but today a steaming latte sat across the table, a packet of brown sugar on its saucer. He nudged the latte toward her. "For you. You ordered Americano with 3 sugars last time, but I figured today you need some foam." Maya blinked at his recall. She set down her folder and sat, cradling the warm cup in her cold hands, the chill slowly melting from her fingers. I brought everything. She opened the folder, files arranged chronologically, copies of the original partnership agreement, technical patents, equity confirmations, the accident report, Howard Joe's inspection records, and the contents of Henry Joe's tin box, including a copy of Howard's suicide note. I haven't cross-checked every detail, but the skeleton is complete. Evan's gaze swept over the folder, but he didn't reach for it. His eyes lingered on the top photo. 4 young people grinning before a factory gate, their smiles stark against the present. He studied it for a long moment, then said, "The woman next to my father, that's your mother, isn't it?" Maya nodded. Her name was Yun Jo. She handled accounting. Evan raised his coffee, took a sip, and set it down with a soft clink. "When I was little, I asked my mother who that lady was in Dad's photos. She said, a colleague. She never let me see those pictures again, so your mother was in on it too. In her final words, she told my father to look after you. She said she owed your father." Maya's voice dropped. "Evan, I'm not laying this out today to ask forgiveness or to soften you on the withdrawal. I'm here because you, as Jiangsu's son, deserve all of it. Whatever you decide, at least you're choosing with the full truth." Evan was silent, then extended his right hand and opened the top file, the accident report. His fingers were steady, page by page, until he reached the inspector's signature line. Howard Joe's name appeared below his handwritten note. Due to deadline pressure, no secondary inspection performed. Deeply remorseful. The words were scribbled with force, the paper edges stained with dried watermarks, maybe tears. "This report was buried," Evan said. "The original should be in police archives. This is only an internal copy. But it's enough to prove the fault wasn't just the suppliers. Management was also at fault." Maya nodded. "I plan to make it public, along with all the agreements, to employees, shareholders, and the public. But I want your input first. You're the one most directly affected." Evan looked up, and in those calm eyes, Maya saw something new. Not anger or sadness, but a kind of prickling warmth, like skin after long cold wind. "Maya, do you know why I stayed at Everjoy for 7 years?" She shook her head. "Year 1, I hated your father. When I joined, I'd already found some leads. I knew something was off about my father's death. I planned to gather evidence, expose him, take my due, and disappear." His voice was level, as if telling someone else's story. "But I spent 3 months as a junior quality inspector, working overtime with the crew, eating boxed meals. Many of those workers had known my father. They didn't know who I was, but they'd talk about Mr. Shu, how he'd solder until his fingers bled, how he'd buy everyone soda on payday. They'd say, if Mr. Shu were alive, Everjoy would be different." Maya's eyes burned. She imagined young Evan, in work clothes, listening to old-timers reminisce about his father. How agonizing, hearing his father's legacy praised while he couldn't reveal himself, working alongside the daughter of the man who'd indirectly caused his death. "Year 2, I realized your father, for all his silence on the accident, was quietly compensating your mother, my mother, and Henry Joe's mother. He sent anonymous money to Henry's mother every year until she passed. He put me through the best university, found me the best department, never interfered." Evan traced the rim of his cup. "I thought, this man made a mistake, but he spent a lifetime atoning. If I expose him, what happens to Henry Joe, to those old workers? If Everjoy collapses, thousands of families lose their livelihood." "So you stayed silent," Maya said. "Not entirely." Evan shook his head. "Year 3, I got to know you. You'd just returned from abroad, appointed vice president. You were sharp. You could reduce a department head to tears in meetings, but when you talked business, your eyes had light, the same light the old workers talked about with my father. I thought, maybe Bowen Shen's daughter can be different. Maybe she can take Everjoy where secrets don't need to hide. So I stayed, as your assistant, handling your errands and watching you. Maya recalled how he'd always appeared at the right moment, with documents, coffee, schedule reminders. She'd thought it mechanical obedience. Now she understood the weighing, the hope it contained. And the payoff he'd gotten was her explosion yesterday. "I let you down," she said, her voice bitter. He didn't deny it. He leafed to Howard Joe's suicide note and read softly. "Brother, I've failed Mr. Zhang. Tomorrow I'll turn myself in, but first I wanted to say goodbye." He paused. He didn't turn himself in. He jumped. That means the fear wasn't just about the law. It was facing your father, facing my mother's grief. He was too young to bear the weight. Howard's brother called him a coward, Maya said. "A coward?" Evan laughed, a bitter, helpless sound. A 22-year-old, pressured by a superior, signed a report he wasn't sure about, and when a life was lost, he didn't deflect or make excuses. He paid with his life. That's not a coward. That's the hardest backbone of all. He just didn't know how to keep living. Maya broke down, tears spilling. She thought of the faces at yesterday's all-hands, of Auntie Liu calling her good. She understood now why Evan had stayed 7 years. Not revenge, not even for the money. He'd stayed because he wanted the company built on his father's life to stop repeating the same tragedy. And she, with never to be rehired, had nearly dismantled his life's work. "Evan, one last question." She wiped her eyes. "If I reveal everything, the accident report, Howard's note, your father's agreements, Everjoy will face a media storm. Stock will drop. We might not survive 30 days. Do you want that? Or would you rather I continue to hide it, digest it gradually?" Evan leaned back, his gaze shifting from the tower outside to Maya's face. He looked at her a long time, until his black coffee was stone cold. "Maya, when you apologized at the all-hands, did you think about consequences?" "No, I just felt I had to." "Then the same now." He closed the folder and slid it back. "Ask yourself, if your father were awake, your mother watching, the old workers in their workshops, what would they want? For you to keep covering it up, everyone trapped in a pleasant lie? Or to crack it open, let them see beneath, and decide together how to move?" Maya picked up the folder and hugged it to her chest. She took a long, slow breath. "I choose to crack it open." That short smile crossed Evan's lips again, like yesterday, but now she recognized it, a satisfied, relieved smile. "Then tomorrow, hold a press conference. I'll attend as Jiangsu's heir. Not to threaten, to face every old account and settle them. Tell your father first, prepare him. I'll also contact Henry Zhou to be a witness." "You'll stand with me in public?" Maya was surprised. "I thought you'd stay in the shadows, wait for me to stumble, then emerge." "That was my plan." He admitted it easily. "But then I heard the recording from your all-hands. Auntie Leah sent it to me. I heard you calling out your faults, one by one, apologizing to the janitor. Maya, any person who can enumerate their mistakes before 300 people, that's a courage my father would have respected. So I'll walk this path with you." Something hard and frozen in Maya's chest began to shatter. She stood and extended her hand. Then it settled. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the Everjoy Press Hall. We face it together." Evan looked at her outstretched hand, hesitated a beat, then took it. His palm was dry and warm, with calluses from years of holding soldering irons. He'd spent 2 full years in the workshop before becoming her assistant. Holding those calluses, she felt like she wasn't grasping a hand, but 28 years of time, two intertwined fates, the memory of a whole city. "Maya," he said softly as he let go, "don't forget, you have 30 days. Today is day 2, 28 left." "I know." She lifted the folder. 28 days is enough to tear down a castle and enough to build a new one. She stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun, looked up at Everjoy Tower. The glass still shone with blinding reflections, but this time she didn't flinch. Those light patches seemed like small mirrors, reflecting countless real, living people on the other side. Officer Liu, Lead Engineer Li, Auntie Liu, Henry Zhou, Evan, and her father Bowen Shen. She would open the sunlight for them all. Maya drove to the hospital. Bowen was doing rehab exercises, the nurse helping him take 3 halting steps from bed to window. When he saw her, he dismissed the nurse and leaned on the sill, catching his breath, eyes lifting to the sky. "Dad, I'm holding a press conference tomorrow," Maya said directly. "Everything comes out. Evan and Henry Zhou will join me. The accident report, Howard Zhou's note, all the agreements." Bowen's body went still. Slowly he turned, leaning against the sill, a tremor passing through his flaccid face. In a faint, almost inaudible voice, "You've decided?" "Yes." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he stared at the ceiling as if searching for someone. "Your mother once said something similar. Bowen, let's come clean, turn ourselves in, pay what we owe, do the time." I refused. I was selfish. I was afraid of the company collapsing, the workers losing their jobs, Zheng's son being left with nothing. I took the safe route, buried the truth. But the way your mother looked at me after that changed. She closed her eyes, but I had to do it for her. Maya moved to his side, steadying his trembling arm. "Dad, I don't blame you. Given the choices then, you did what you thought was right. But today, I can carry the consequences. Evan is with me. We can't let the next generation live in this shadow." Bowen looked at her, tears glistening in his clouded eyes. "You're even more stubborn than your mother." He paused, then forced out the words, "I can't come to the conference. But I can record a statement, a video, I'll say it. The biggest mistake I've ever made was covering up the accident and pressuring Howard Zhou to sign off. I owe Jiangshu a life. I owe Howard Zhou a life. I owe my wife the truth." Maya helped him back to bed, fetched paper and pen, and recorded the video. On screen, Bowen Shen, gaunt in his hospital gown but resolute, spoke in a hoarse but clear voice, the entire story, the accident, Howard's inspection, Zheng's death, his years of concealment and compensation. He ended, "Jiangsu, if you're watching from above, seeing my daughter tear open the truth for your son. Maybe you'll forgive my cowardice. Howard, you foolish boy, I've read your note countless times, and I think, if only I'd stopped you that day, you might still be alive. I'm sorry for everything." Maya saved the video, hugged her father's thin shoulders. He whispered in her ear, "Maya, if Everjoy is gone tomorrow, you still have me. Dad's stash is really enough for 2 years of wontons." She laughed through fresh tears. "Dad, Evan won't let it fall. He just wants it to be better." Leaving the hospital, she drove to Henry Zhou's. She laid out her plan. The old man was quiet for a long time, then rose and took the tin box from the shelf, handing it to her. "Take my brother's original note. Copies miss something. The tea stain on the original is from the last cup I made him. He drank half, then ran out. I chased after him. He was already in a taxi." Maya took the tin box, heavy in her arms. "Mr. Zhou, will you come tomorrow?" He nodded slowly. "I will. I'll sit in the front. I want my brother to see that I finally spoke out." That night, Maya returned to her office to draft the press release. Halfway through, Evan pushed in, his keycard still active, and sat across from her. "I'll help you run through it. First paragraph. Start with Everjoy's history and founding vision before introducing the accident. Don't lead with tragedy, build the frame." She looked at him. "You're free tonight." "I am." He opened his laptop. "But I'll work here. Do you have a power outlet?" She pointed to the wall strip. They sat opposite each other, typing, occasionally exchanging a word, mostly just the rhythm of keyboards and the city glow beyond the window. This had happened before, Evan staying late as her assistant, but she'd never looked up, seen him only as a silent fixture. Now, she glanced over, the focus in his profile, the shadow of his lashes under the light, and realized he'd always been alive. She'd just never noticed. At 1 a.m., she finished her draft and stretched. Evan closed his laptop, stood. "I'm done. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'll pick up Henry Zhou, meet you in the lobby." "Evan," she called as he reached the door. "Whatever happens, will you stay at Everjoy?" He stood with his back to her, then turned his head. "That depends. If after all this, we can look forward together, maybe I'll come back, as a partner. But if you still need an assistant..." A wry smile touched his lips. "I've had enough of being an assistant." She smiled too. Would partner be enough? He didn't answer, just walked out. She heard his footsteps fade in the corridor and leaned back, watching the outside light in the doorway. That old ache in her chest had begun to ease. The next day, 2:50 p.m., Everjoy Press Hall, usually seating 200, now packed with over 300. Media journalists crammed the front row with cameras and microphones, the back filled with employees and shareholders. Arthur handed out schedules. Officer Liu helped distribute water. Auntie Liu had changed into a clean jacket, seated in the first employee row, clutching a tissue. Maya waited behind the side curtain, heart racing. Evan approached from the other side, in a navy suit and silver tie, tall and composed. Henry followed with a cane, wearing a Chinese-style jacket with a white flower on his lapel. "Ready?" Evan asked. Maya inhaled deeply and nodded. She stepped onto the podium. Flashbulbs exploded. Maya braced her hands on the lectern, leaned slightly forward, her voice clear through the microphones. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, colleagues, shareholders, thank you for coming. Today's announcement is about a chapter in Everjoy's history from 28 years ago, a chapter involving death, concealment, guilt, and restitution. As current CEO, I have a duty to tell the whole truth." She delivered the speech verbatim, then played Bowen's video. The once dominant businessman, frail but firm, told his story, pausing several times, choking when he reached Howard's note. The hall was dead silent, except for camera shutters. After the video, she called Henry to the stage. The old man steadied himself on the podium, trembling hands pulling out the original, tea-stained letter, unfolding it before the microphone. The handwriting was scrawled, each word carved into the page. After reading it aloud, Henry turned to the room and said, "My brother Howard took his life to bear the responsibility for signing that form. I stand here today to tell you, he was not a coward. He was a 20-year-old boy cornered into an impossible decision, and Everjoy owes him a proper memorial." Employees wept openly. Maya stood aside, tears streaming. Finally, Evan stepped up. No notes, hands in pockets, scanning the room. "My name is Evan Xu. Zheng Xu was my father. He always said that people in industry must be answerable to their conscience, because products speak, accidents speak, time reveals everything. Today, after 28 years, My father's long-awaited truth has arrived. I don't blame Bowen Shen. He spent half his life making amends in whatever way he could. I don't blame Howard Joe. He atoned in the most painful way possible. To everyone still working at Everjoy, I say this. What's past is over. Starting tomorrow, this company holds no secrets, no hidden ledgers, no debts of the heart. Together, we'll rebuild from these ruins. When he finished, there was a long hush, then applause, rising like a tidal wave. Auntie Liu was first to stand and clap, followed by lead engineer Lee, then the finance team. Henry wept openly on stage. Maya turned to Evan, her voice choked. Thank you. In his eyes, those always calm eyes, she saw for the first time a clear, warm light. After the press conference, media swarmed the exits. Maya and Evan slipped away through a side door to a small garden behind the building. A spring breeze carried the sweetness of locust blossoms. They sat together on a bench, not speaking, just watching the long shadow of Everjoy Tower stretch into the dusk. Evan, how many days are left? Maya asked. 21 from today. He turned to her. But I think you've outgrown that 30-day contract. Why? Because you've done it. He gazed at the skyline. What my father wanted wasn't money, shares, or revenge. He wanted the company that cost him his life to live cleanly. Today, you've washed it. Maya looked down, fidgeting with her fingers. After a long moment, she whispered, So, will you still leave? He paused. My mother left me a small shop in Canada, coffee and used books. I've always meant to help her, but... His lips curved, that short, relieved smile again. If you need a partner who can handle accounts, solder circuit boards, and make a decent cup of coffee, I might delay leaving by a few years. Maya lifted her face, tears blurring the sunset, but smiling with all her heart. Then it's settled. Delay it. Until Everjoy truly becomes a company with no secrets, where everyone can work with dignity. Then I'll come with you to meet your mother. He didn't answer, just reached over and placed a warm hand on her shoulder. Those long fingers with calluses from soldering irons, but also bearing the weight of 7 years of silence and 1 day's release. Dusk thickened. City lights blinked on across the sky. Everjoy Tower's glass panels mirrored the blazing twilight, a vast mirror rinsed by fire. Maya sat on the bench, feeling the shadow of 28 years finally dissolve. Tomorrow would be Everjoy's first true day. No pretense, no guilt, no hidden tears. Only a group of people willing to face the past and build the future. She turned to Evan, wanting to speak, but found no words needed. The breeze moved through the garden, and locust blossoms drifted down like a long overdue, gentle snow.